Hello and welcome! Building yourself a legitimate ROM library is surprisingly hard. Not only is the documentation sparse and hard to find, but you might be having to spend a lot of money just for the devices in order to make the ROMs for your currently existing games. Wouldn't it just be great if you can go online and just buy the ROMs digitally? Well, if you're up for a little bit of a challenge and have yourself some virtual console games and a hacked Nintendo 3DS, you can. And today, I'm going to show you how. But first, a message from us at 16-Bit. Today's video is sponsored by us at the 16-Bit Store. Organize and display your games and systems with our 3D printed display stands. They are designed and printed by us to fit your games and systems comfortably so they can be displayed beautifully. They're available now at the 16-Bit Store, so if you're interested, why not check them out from the links in the description. Before we begin, a bit of a disclaimer. The purpose of this video is to show you how to back up and extract the ROM files from your virtual console games for your own personal use. You're not allowed to sell, distribute, or even share your ROMs that you create from this video, as that is considered piracy, especially to Nintendo. So if you want to learn more about backup games and things around that, please watch our video on the matter or extra credits video, as it goes into more details than what I'm willing to give here. So, what will you need in order to extract the ROMs from a Nintendo 3DS Virtual Console game? Well, you will need a hacked Nintendo 3DS with God Mode 9, a downloaded Virtual Console game, and a computer, preferably with Windows on it, in order to transfer and edit the ROM files with. And depending on the ROM, you might need some additional software, which I will link below. Now, Nintendo offers Virtual Console games on the Nintendo 3DS for 4 to 5 systems. The Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Sega Game Gear, Nintendo Entertainment System, and if you happen to have a new Nintendo 3DS like I do, you will also be able to access Super Nintendo games. And each system has a unique way for finding and extracting the ROM files, but luckily, most of the ROMs are located in the same spot. And to find them, you'll need to boot your 3DS into God Mode 9 by powering on the system and pressing start immediately afterwards. And once booted to the main menu, we're going to do exactly what we did to back up our eShop games. So go into Cincinnati SD, highlight titles, press R and A together, and search for titles. Once the search has been done, we're going to want to look for the game we want to find. Once selected, press on TMD file options like we did before. But unlike before, we don't actually need to build a CIA. Though if you do, the tools you'll need to find are CTR tools or using Citra in order to extract the files and view the unencrypted game data. But if you don't have a Windows PC or you don't want to do any of that, there's an easier solution by just mounting the CXI NDS to drive. This will mount your game to God Mode 9 and allow us to browse the game files and extract the ROM. Now, there are two parts in order to get a ROM from a 3DS and using it in emulation. The first thing we need to do is actually define the ROM data. Then we need to process that ROM so that it's usable in emulation software. And sadly, each system has a different means in order to get it to work. So we're going to start off by locating Super Nintendo ROMs, and all we need to do is look in the root of the ROMs FS folder and find the data.bin file. That's your ROM. Once you've found it, select it and copy it to GM9 out so we can process it on a Windows machine. Fortunately for us, NES, Game Boy, and Game Boy Color ROMs are all located in the same section, but each require a different method to process it. So we'll need to go into the ROM FS folder and go into the ROM folder. And the file that you will find in there is your ROM data. And just like a Super Nintendo game, select the game that you want to copy and select copy to GM9 out. And for Sega Game Gear ROMs, we're going into the ROM FS folder, Systems folder, ROMs folder, and copying the file that's there. If you have more ROMs that you want to process in one go, back out to the GM9 menu and select last search option at the bottom of your menu items to quickly find your next game. So now that our ROM data has been extracted, it's time to prepare them to work in normal emulators. So let's start with the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, a fun fact of the NES ROMs that are on Nintendo's Virtual Console service, they've all been formatted in a unique format to Nintendo called TNES. Whereas most ROMs that you find on the internet are formatted in a way called iNES. So you'll need to convert your TNES ROMs to iNES ROMs. And to do this, you will need to download a Godmo 9 script called TNES to iNES, which I will have linked below. Make sure the TNES to iNES script is located in the GM9 scripts folder, and back in Godmo 9, press home and select scripts, then select the TNES to iNES script. Here you'll need to find the ROM you want to convert, and once you have found it, mine's located in GM9 out, press A on the game, and it'll ask us whether we want horizontal or vertical mirroring. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find a tool that'll actually tell you which game uses a mirroring technique, but it doesn't seem that a lot actually do, so you can pretty much just select any mirroring and it should work. But if it doesn't work, don't worry, TNES to iNES backs up the game as it's before it converts it, so you can easily just go back through if it does fail and use the other option. As an aside, if you have a Famicom Disk System game like Super Mario Bros. 2, there is no way that I know of to convert the ROM to be usable in an emulator. As from what I've discovered while poking around with the file, eShop Famicom Disk System games are uniquely formatted in such a way that it has a modified Famicom Disk System ROM as an 8 kilobyte header on the game itself, and the disk data is the rest of the game's data. It's a bit convoluted, but for now, Famicom Disk System games are just stuck on your Nintendo 3DS. Now that our TNES games have been converted to iNES, the last thing that we need to do is to put the game file onto our PC and change the file extension, that's the .64 dot whatever, to .NES. And now your game should work in most NES emulators. Now that we've converted an NES game, let's next move on to Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. And thankfully, they are the easiest games to back up and process, since they haven't been modified at all. So, move the ROMs to a computer of some sort and rename the file extension to .gb for Game Boy games and .gbc for Game Boy Color games, and you're done. There's nothing else you need to do. And more than likely, you probably also want to bring that Pokemon save data with you. But I don't know where it's actually located, and it's easy enough to use the 3DS save managers like Checkpoint in order to get those. And if you want to go into more details on how to do that, we've already made a video about that, which I'll link below or in the cards. Next, we're moving on to the Sega Game Gear ROMs, and sadly this is where the processing starts becoming a little difficult, since Game Gear ROMs are compressed with the MDF format. So you're going to have to download the command line tool, MDF tool, on a Windows machine. I'll have the download link for that below. And once that's been downloaded, put your compressed ROM file into the same folder as the MDF tool and open a command line that's in that folder. Once done, you're going to have to run the command line MDF compressor with the ROM file as the variable, and once completed, you should have an output file that is the decompressed Game Gear ROM that should work. The only thing that's left to do is to make sure that the ROM file has the file extension .gg in order for it to work in an emulator. However, that's far from where this story ends. because from what I found with my Sonic the Hedgehog ROM, the file is a little bit different from the original version, since I can't import it into RetroArch. But if I was to throw it into any Game Gear emulator, including the ones on RetroArch, the game ran fine. Finally, I'm going to show you how to process Super Nintendo ROMs, and there's really no documentation about this other than a little bit of internet squabble. So a lot of my understanding comes from playing around with the SNES injector. From my understanding, SNES games on the 3DS Virtual Console have an added file header, which we'll need to remove with a hex editing tool like HXD. So, once you've opened your Super Nintendo ROM file in HXD, remove the added file header and rename the ROM to a .sfc Super Famicom, and that should be enough to get the game to work. But again, much like the Game Gear ROMs, these games are different from their original counterparts. And from what I have found online about Super Nintendo ROMs on 3DS Virtual Console, some games might not have working audios and others might just be modified like this one. So it's really hit or miss whether or not the game will actually work. I got lucky with Breath of Fire and it worked for me. But if you have other options to get legit Super Nintendo ROMs, like with the Wii or Wii U, I highly recommend using those instead. So there you have it. That's how you can extract the ROMs from your 3DS Virtual Console games and process them to be used later. I've personally been enjoying Shantae with this method, since it's actually cheaper to go out and buy yourself a 3DS, buy the Virtual Console game, and an EverDrive than it is to actually go out and buy the original game. I've also used this method in my What Makes a Good remaster video for the Sonic the Hedgehog portion, as I had no way to actually back up a Sega Game Gear game yet. But anyways, thank you ever so much for watching this video. I do hope this video helps you with your legit ROM library endeavors. As always, I hope you have yourself a good day, and take care. And don't forget about the new poll available every Friday for the 16-bit viewers special. Vote for which games you want to see us review in our community tabs. Links will be provided below.